Over the past few years and with the advent of Apple Silicon, the MacBook Air has gone from probably the best laptop for most people to head and shoulders above the competition in its price range. Seriously, it's hard to understate how great the MacBook Air truly is, and the fact is that anyone who wants a do-it-all laptop and can afford the MacBook Air should get it. But now the decision is slightly more difficult. Why? Well, for the first time in a long time, Apple is finally offering a big screen MacBook Air, having taken the wraps off the new 15-inch model. That means that there's now a MacBook for anyone who can afford to spend at least $900 or so. There's a big powerful one in the 16-inch MacBook Pro, a small powerful one in the 14-inch MacBook Pro, a small cheaper one in the 13-inch MacBook Air, and finally, a big cheaper one in the new 15-inch MacBook Air. But just being big doesn't automatically make the new MacBook Air great. Does it really live up to the MacBook Air name? I've been using it to find out. If you're obsessed with tech like me and want more videos like this, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support my work and I'd appreciate that support. If you've seen the 13-inch MacBook Air before, you know pretty much what to expect for the 15-inch model. Seriously, like the advertisements, the larger MacBook Air just looks like a stretched out version of the 13-inch model. That's not a bad thing though. The 13-inch MacBook Air looks great, and so does the new 15-inch model. I did love the tapered design of previous MacBook Air models, but I also like the new uniform flat edge design of the recent models. It also helps that they're incredibly thin and light, helping make for a laptop that does truly live up to that Air name. That's not to say that the 15-inch model isn't quite big. I'm used to smaller laptops these days and I prefer them, so the larger footprint of the 15-inch MacBook Air feels quite big to me. Of course, that's kind of the point. If you didn't want a big screen experience, you would buy the 13-inch model of the computer. But I would have thought that the uniform thickness would have allowed for a better port selection. The laptop has a MagSafe 3 charging connector along with two Thunderbolt ports on the left side, with a headphone jack on the right side. A third Thunderbolt port would have been nice on the right side, to allow for peripherals to be connected on both sides of the laptop. The MacBook Air, like the Pro, has a notch in the display, and I do wish that the notch hit a Face ID sensor. That said, I don't really mind the notch overall, and macOS does a pretty good job at hiding it too. You'll forget it exists pretty quick. Speaking of the display, it looks excellent. It's not super fancy, that's to say it isn't an OLED display or a high refresh rate display, which is a bit of a shame, but it's still a good looking display. It's a 15.3-inch LED display with a 2880 by 1864 resolution and a brightness of 500 nits. I found that it got easily bright enough for the vast majority of situations, including use outdoors. The resolution made for crisp text and detailed images overall. While I hope that Apple adds more advanced tech to the displays on the MacBook Air in the near future, for now, it does perfectly fine. Then there's the keyboard, and it proves that Apple has well and truly left the days of the butterfly keyboard behind. The keyboard on the 15-inch MacBook Air feels excellent, offering keys that are well spaced and offer enough travel for marathon typing experiences. I know people love typing on a mechanical keyboard, and I get it, I find them great too. But when I really want to get down to typing over longer periods of time, I find the keyboards on the MacBook laptops to be perfect. Maybe that's just what I'm used to. Slightly more objective, however, is the quality of the touchpad. For years, the quality of Apple touchpads has been head and shoulders above anyone else, and that remains true here. The corners and edges are responsive, and they look and feel great. On the 15-inch MacBook Air, the touchpad is nice and big, making it easy to whiz around the software and scroll through web pages. The speakers in the 15-inch MacBook Air are phenomenal for a pair of built-in speakers. They're definitely better than those in the 13-inch MacBook Air and can get super loud. And while headphones and external speakers are still better, in a pinch you could do much worse than the speakers in this laptop. Apple has really been putting a lot of effort into the speakers, and I hope that continues. The speakers in all of its devices are great and getting better. I hope other companies take note a little more. The microphones on the laptop aren't as impressive as the speakers, but they're still great, as you can hear right now. They produce a solid frequency response overall, and that means you'll sound pretty good in video calls. I wouldn't, use it to record YouTube videos, but it's still better than most other built-in microphones. The webcam is another good point, though it's even less impressive than the speakers and the microphones. It's essentially the same webcam that Apple has been using on its other laptops, but that's not a bad thing. It has a 1080p resolution, and it produces decent colors. The 15-inch MacBook Air comes with the same M2 processor that you can find in the 13-inch model and the Mac Mini. Sure, there are plenty of chipsets above it in the M2 line, but it does make for a pretty high-performance laptop overall. There's only one chip option on offer by the MacBook Air, unlike the MacBook Pro. In the Air, you'll get an 8-core CPU and a 10-core GPU. It can be coupled with either 8GB, 16GB, or 24GB of RAM. In day-to-day use, I found that the laptop performs perfectly well. For things like web apps, emails, word processing, and media consumption, the MacBook Air is a great machine, and I never found it to lag or stutter in these workloads, like any of Apple's other entry-level products. Of course, the 15-inch MacBook Air will start to suffer a little under heavy workloads. The laptop isn't really built for heavy video editing, though I did find that it handled audio editing pretty well. The vast majority of users who need a new laptop will be perfectly happy with the level of performance here, even with the M2 chip. Demanding users, however, might want to think about upgrading to the MacBook Pro, though that demands a premium, and not everyone will want to spend that extra cash. For most users, of course, the biggest advantage to Apple's move to its own chips has been in the battery life. There's good reason for that. The very first generation of Apple Silicon devices offered a massive improvement in battery life over the last generation of Intel MacBooks, and that continues with the 15-inch M2 MacBook Air. The laptop easily got me through a full workday, and I think the same will be true for most. During testing, I got the laptop to the end of a full workday with around 40%. After testing time, I still used the MacBook Air anytime I wasn't at my desk, including use on the couch, outside, and so on. In this scenario, I managed to get through around 4 or 5 days of use with a few hours per day before I needed to charge. If you've never had an Apple Silicon Mac before, you'll really be shocked at how great the battery life really is on the 15-inch MacBook Air. And if you have had an Apple Silicon machine, then you should be prepared for more of the same great battery life. When you do finally run out of juice, you'll be able to charge the laptop relatively quickly. By default, the laptop comes with a dual USB-C port 35-watt charger, which isn't bad. But if you want to charge quickly, then I would recommend switching that for the 70-watt charger, which you can do when you buy the laptop for no extra cost. With that charger, you'll be able to fully charge the laptop in under 2 hours. That's not bad. However, there are other laptops that charge much faster, and I hope Apple brings those much faster charging experiences to the MacBook line in the future. Ultimately, the 15-inch MacBook Air just kind of makes sense. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, and I'm glad to see it. The 13-inch MacBook Air was already the best thin and light laptop out there for most users. The 15-inch model just extends that. I still think the majority of buyers should stick to the 13-inch model of the laptop, but if you do really want that extra screen real estate, then the 15-inch model is the MacBook for you. Of course, demanding users should still consider the MacBook Pro. That's especially true for those who need a laptop for things like video editing and audio editing, and for those extra ports. You can get the 15-inch MacBook Air for yourself using the link in the description. Thanks again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.